Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to the Horror Master YouTube channel, and welcome back to episode number 2 of my brand new controversial metal album cover series. Which, honestly, I didn't think the reception of the first episode was gonna be this big, and I wasn't expecting to be this good. But thank you guys so much for watching the video, for liking, and for subscribing to the channel. I was not expecting this video to blow up like the way it did, so thank you guys so much for that. Honestly, I was just doing this as a one and done thing, and from the reception that I saw, I was like, you know what, let's continue doing this series. So like I mentioned before, I'm gonna be tackling some of the most infamous rock and metal album covers. Maybe might go beyond that in later episodes depending how the series goes, but for right now we're gonna be tackling mostly rock and metal album covers. And by that I mean some of the album covers that have been controversial by the time of the release, still controversial, or were released and later became controversial. We're gonna be tackling the history behind the album cover, how it was created, why it was created, for some reason why it was removed, why it was censored, so on and so forth. Because I'm gonna try my best to explain myself like I did in my previous episode. Which, if you have not seen the first episode, I'm gonna link something right about here. If I made it, if my editing is still working up, but regardless, on episode 2 we're gonna be tackling an album that a lot of cover a lot of people, when they see it, they kind of cringe. And to this day, if this album would have been released in 2022, in the 2023, in the first 21st century, it would have been canceled. It would have been like the worst thing anyone could have done. And of course, I'm talking about Virgin Killer by the band Scorpions. This is their first studio album, released on October 9, 1976. So Scorpions is a German band, of course, from Germany. Of course, everyone knows them from the most famous songs from like Rocky Like a Hurricane, Winds of Change, so on and so forth. They're one of the biggest bands next to Rammstein and Accept, who has come out of Germany. So with this fourth studio album, the band, was wanted to expand more into the American scene, which, like any other international band, they want to tackle those states, which is an obvious thing. Like, look at a band like Queen, look at a band like AC/DC. So when this concept of the Virgin Killer was being created, it was actually the studio's idea to have this as the album cover. They didn't actually, discuss it with the band. Once the album cover came to light, they were like, "What the fuck is this?" And for those who might be a bit disgusted with the album cover depicts a sort of 10-year-old girl completely on the nude with a big glass shattering next to her genitalia. And at the time, I mean, to this day, that kind of thing, like pedophilia, is still kind of a toughy subject, which I won't tackle. I hope I don't tackle into this video. But with this album cover, it was the studio's idea to actually put this as the album cover. And the story goes, according to, maybe, I think it was, if I remember his name, I think it was Francis Bockelhut, the former bassist of Scorpion, said that it was either the daughter or the niece of the cover designer who designed the album cover, and he just decided to do that. Which, I don't know what the hell was thinking of doing that, but regardless, once the album was released, the band was kind of iffy about it. I mean, for obvious reasons. I mean, it's a 10-year-old, 9-year-old girl portrayed as something not that you're not supposed to, but the band was like, they were against it. But again, the record label says the final saying, and the band told the record label this is gonna backfire, and the record band label was like, nah, it's not gonna backfire. Lo and behold, it fucking backfired. That it was, nobody wanted to sell this album. Nobody wanted to sell the album. It was a controversy in the UK. It was a controversy in the States. It was a controversy everywhere. But you had this record, to the point that when this album was released, the first printing of the album, which, good fucking luck trying to find a decent copy of this album, because if you find a copy, it is a fucking expensive copy. I've seen copies go for more than like $200, $300, close to $1,000, because this album cover, it's out of print. If you were to find an original album cover, whether it be on CD or on vinyl, that is a rare gem in terms of like album covers and the Scorpion memorabilia. But this album cover was so controversial for obvious reasons that I mentioned, that before it was re-released with a brand new album cover, this album had to be bubble wrapped or maybe put in like a black bag for when you buy it. That way the record, that way the distributors had like, okay, they can sell it, but they weren't gonna sell you the album cover because of course it's a 10-year-old girl with, naked and all that, which is again a really toughy subject. But it is an album cover that to this day the band has stated in like interviews and I mean the years of why they didn't have much saying into the album cover. And like I said, Scorpions at the time, even though they had 4 albums under their belts, they weren't the mega band that they would later become. So, they kind of had to tie their hands to that situation. But with this album cover, it's one of those album covers that to this day still talked about. I mean, like I mentioned, this video, I've heard people regarded. I've said this. I think even the band has said it. This is probably the worst album cover in all existence. I wouldn't consider it the worst because when I define as a worst album cover as an album cover that's so awful and disgusting in terms of like a bad painting or a bad photograph. This, I'm not saying it's a bad album cover. I'm just saying it's a good album cover. It's not the worst. I've seen a lot worse. That's why I consider this a bit more controversial album cover because you're depicting a 10-year-old girl, which, funny enough, I mean, years later, the girl who's now at this point a older lady, I'm musing, she was interviewed for the album cover and she didn't mind doing that, which, good for her for she didn't mind that. But you must have been thinking at the time, in the mid 70s to early 80s, it was the beginning of the internet. Things were beginning to be weird and during that time period. And like I mentioned before, if this album cover would have been released in the 21st century, in 2023, the band would have been canceled out of spite. Like, the record label would have shut them down. It would have been the end of their careers because of this album cover. And there come cases that a lot of bands in the 21st century almost got banned, almost got released from the record labels because they released a very controversial album cover, like something like Slay or Cannibal Corpse. Cannibal Corpse, the record label was behind the album cover, but they weren't allowed to sell certain album covers in Germany, which is a different story. But with Virgin Killer, I consider this like one of the top 5 controversial album covers because of the depicting of a young 10-year-old girl in the nude, which it's kind of a touchy subject. Like I mentioned before, it's something that I don't know why the record label decided to do it. Like I mentioned before, it was the same. It was the 70s. They were must have been all fucked up, all on drugs, on cocaine, on weed. So all those juices and all that fucking mentality just went into their brains and decided to, hey, what would be awesome? Let's put a 10-year-old girl on the album cover. Which, again, I mean, it did sell. The album did sell. I mean, regardless from the album cover, the songs are amazing, but the album cover is always the one thing that's always gets touched about. That's why in the later issues of the album cover, you get the alternative album cover, and I'm not sure because I don't have the album, and which I would like to have the album. Honestly, if I had the chance to buy the original album cover on CD, I'd probably buy it because, like I mentioned before, it is a historical piece in terms of metal and censorship. And not saying that I'm like the kind of person who likes that kind of stuff, but I've seen worse album covers, to be honest. But if I were to buy it, I would like to have it on the collection as a piece because it's a rare feast of pine. Like I mentioned before, try looking on eBay, on Discogs. If you have the money to buy that motherfucker, go for it. But I'm not gonna spend close to $500 on one fucking album. With $500, I'd rather buy like a shitload, like 100+ CDs, or hell, that's like half of the collection worth, like more than that, $500. But regardless, Virgin Killer, Scorpions, one of the controversial album covers in existence. Like I mentioned before, if I were to rank this album cover in my most controversial album covers of all time, I'd say probably in the top 2, maybe in the top 5. But like I mentioned before, don't blame the band for this. Blame the fucking record label. Blame RCA Records, who decided to put this mind-blowing piece that to this day I have no idea why they decided to. But it is what it is in the 70s, and that's why this album cover has been regarded as one of the most controversial album covers in rock and metal history. And That's just for this video, guys. I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. Like I mentioned before, it's gonna take me a while to figure out how I'm gonna do this kind of series. Like I mentioned before, the reception with episode 2 was really fucking amazing. Hopefully this episode does as well. I don't know when I'm gonna do before episode 3 and episode 4, so on and so forth. I'm not sure if I'm gonna do this a weekly thing or bi-weekly thing, depending on how it goes. But like I mentioned before, guys, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. You're Bishop Man. Follow me on my Instagram. Follow me on my Twitter. Let me know in the comments below. You know what album covers you want me to discuss. What album covers you want me to investigate or something like I mentioned before. Most of these album covers I know in my heart because I've read the stories, I've read the articles. But there might be an album cover that I didn't ever expect to be controversial. Like you never know, there might be some controversial album covers that I never fucking knew. So let me know down, guys, in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, stay metal.